So recent killings and unrest in KwaZulu-Natal have been linked to the scourge, the construction mafia. And Macpherson says he's received a report from the Public Works and Infrastructure MEC, Martin Meyer, on how it's resurfaced. It's not new, Minister. Welcome. It's great to have you.
Thank you, Clarence, and it's great to be with you and the listeners on CapeTalk this afternoon.
It's a situation that's kind of made the media over the past decade. It's kind of creeped up. It's kind of crept up on us. The creep into something that is audacious, something maybe an air of impunity around it as well. Clearly, extortionists have been able to get away with it sufficiently to be this audacious.
I think, Clarence, that your assessment is right. I don't think that government has done enough to combat the scourge. We've seen it now also in places like the Western Cape, in Gauteng and in Mpumalanga, and they have been emboldened by the perceived impunity that they have in KwaZulu-Natal. And it was actually the mayor of Cape Town who once said to me that they actually look to KZN for the next form of extortion racket or crime trend that would make its way into Cape Town or the Western Cape, because if these things are not dealt with in provinces like KZN, they often then spread to other parts of the country. So we've come together and we've said that we need to be a lot stronger, a lot bolder, and a lot more determined to take back our construction sites, to ensure that we deliver our infrastructure projects on time and on budget, and that we won't be negotiating with extortionists or mafia type syndicates in any shape or form going forward.
Under the guise of fighting for the local community and employment in the area where construction is planned, are there any, is there substance to their demand, these extortionists? Is it something that we can include in our plans, factor the local employment of people?
Well, I really do get confused when people try and equate people who walk around with AK-47s, inflict violence and murder as some form of benevolent community groups. They are not. They are highly sophisticated, well-armed, organized criminal syndicates that are working across the country to extract as much money through violence and through murder in our construction sites. And I think that what has taken place over the last 10 years is the so-called 30% set-aside rule, which is not legislated anywhere. It was pronounced by former President Jacob Zuma and then just made a treasury regulation as a part of procurement. That is what has become the gateway and the monetization of violence at our construction sites. And so we absolutely want to see small and medium-sized players in the built environment develop and grow. We must use the state spending and infrastructure plans to do so. But we are not going to confuse them with extortion rackets and criminals. And the biggest tragedy of all of this is that it's actually small-owned startup businesses that are trying to get a foot in a very complex and competitive construction industry that are being shut out by these mafias. So they are not the same thing. We need to treat them as criminals, and that's what the view of government is going forward.
So there are legitimate groupings that are looking to be part of, let's call construction activity within their communities, and then there's the Mafia Types on the outside that want 30% off the top.
Well, what we are saying is that we must actually look to work with legitimate businesses that are small and medium-sized businesses in the built environment and construction industry. Those are who we should be looking to work with. And those are, and then where there are projects in communities, of course, we should be looking to use local community people to work and to gain skills in these projects. But you cannot simply say in the value of a project that you're going to monetize that and say, well, that is up for discussion and that is up for debate. It must either be about real development and real opportunity, or we must just accept that we are going to be beholden to this racket that seeks to extort rands and cents out of businesses. That's not what we have signed up for. We want to see real development, And I think what we need to do is we need to urgently review around the gateway that this 30% set aside has become, because local businesses and small players are just not benefiting. They themselves are being targeted by the mafia. So we are very determined that we need to get this thing back on track. And that's why we want to have a national summit. We want to get everyone in the room, all the players, the NECs, the various ministers, and have a common approach and a single approach to this problem so that we can combat it once and for all.
Sure. Surely there must be trends at station level. The police could have been maybe a little more proactive about it, responded to the trends and nipped it in the bud. What has been lacking in our response to this extortion rackets that have gained ground on us?
So, I think that it's multifaceted, and I was in the Camperdown court in KZN yesterday after the SAPS arrested 5 people allegedly linked to these syndicates that had gone to intimidate and extract money from a construction site on a national infrastructure project near Pietermaritzburg. And they were called out by the local company, and they responded effectively. I think often what happens is that a lot of the stuff is not reported or not brought to the police's attention. And I don't think that there's a specialized focus around the country on these extortion rings. So, you would just expect, your local police officer to arrive there with people who are well armed, sophisticated and highly trained in weaponry. And so I think that we're looking at it at the wrong way. I think we need to be using intelligence, whether it be crime intelligence and state intelligence. We know who these people are, and they are not unknown to us. You see them driving in very fancy, expensive cars surrounded with 10 bodyguards and automatic weapons. We must go after them, and we must bring them to book. And until such time as we start meting out prison sentences to people, they will continue to act with impunity. And that's why I went and sat in the courtroom myself yesterday to ensure that those 5 individuals were remanded into custody, that further investigations continue so that we start making examples of people and that they know that they cannot hold the state hostage any longer.
I'm chatting with Minister Dean Macpherson, Minister of Public Works, and Public Works are looking to square off with the construction mafia. Recent killings and unrest in KwaZulu-Natal have been linked to the scourge, and Dean Macpherson says he received a report from the Public Works and Infrastructure MEC in KwaZulu-Natal, Martin Meyer, on how it's resurfaced. Give us a sense of this resurfacing that you've noticed in KwaZulu-Natal.
Well, it's definitely happened just prior to the elections, and I have my views that some of these mafia are linked to political parties, particularly in KZN. I found it extraordinary yesterday when I was in the Camperdown court that people had mobilized outside of the court to protest for the release of these thugs, and they were dressed in MK party T-shirts, and I just found that to be absolutely unbelievable. So there's been a resurgence since the election and post the election. We have over 50 sites that are currently either stopped or severely delayed, worth over 100 billion rand that the state has spent in value towards these sites. So it's not a question of whether we can allow this to continue. It goes to the very heartbeat of whether we want to have an infrastructure-led growing economy that creates jobs. We cannot negotiate on the one hand and want a growing economy on the other hand. And that's why we are determined to make sure that when we go to investors and we go to funders and we pitch for new massive infrastructure projects, that we're able to give them the assurance that their projects will not be delayed or withdrawn or the contracts cancelled because people have come there expecting hundreds of millions of rands in payoffs. So that's what we've seen of late. We've seen, and unfortunately, people lose their lives. There was a managing director of a very prominent construction company. He had an attempted assassination on his life. They shot at him 6 times outside his house, and thank goodness he was able to survive. It was left in a critical condition. This is what people are facing. And let me say, it's not just in KZN. It has surfaced in Cape Town. And I commend the mayor and the city government under Jordan Hill-Lewis that they have taken proactive steps to fund law enforcement, that they have taken proactive steps to make rewards available for information that leads to the arrests of people. And there were a number of individuals that were arrested after a city official was assassinated outside a project some time ago. So, when we work together, I think that those are the kind of results that we need to see. But let me tell you, and please take my word for it, there is no town or city or province that is immune from these thugs and criminals.
Okay, my colleague Lester had an interesting conversation with an academic in Colombia. And in about the 1980s, 1990s, they also suffered extortion rackets to the extent that we are suffering them at this very moment in time. And the academic described that it is in instances where government are absent in society when these rackets, when these criminal types move in. And ultimately, government is responsible for that. Would you agree that government is ultimately responsible for not holding their space on the ground and allowing criminal types to invade it?
One of the key requirements of government in the Constitution is to provide safety and security for the people of our country. And so absolutely we are responsible for that. And I think that for a long time that government has been absent. But I do believe that there is a change in focus and in intensity under the Government of National Unity to take back our projects that are being funded by us. It would be incomprehensible to believe that we would fund projects and then not protect them at the same time. And I think to President Cyril Ramaphosa's credit that when a number of our power stations were under attack by saboteurs sometime last year, the SANDF was deployed to protect them because they knew and understood that they were national assets and important infrastructure to keep our country going. I think it's time that we have that conversation whether we view hundreds of billions of rands being spent in infrastructure projects to keep our economy going and growing, whether we should not be providing that level of security and commitment by the state. So we have every responsibility and requirement to protect our assets and to protect the work that we are doing. And I think that we are moving in that direction, not at the pace that I would like, but I think that it's definitely better than when we were or than where we were some months ago.
If you can't arrest those complicit in this construction mafia, maybe at least arrest the trend. That's obviously important in your quest to turn the country into a construction site. To what extent does it bedevil the rollout of your services and plans?
We cannot turn South Africa into a construction site if our construction sites cannot even get off of the ground. And so they are intrinsically linked. And when I meet with institutional developers and financiers, the question that they ask me is that how do we guarantee the security of our sites so that our return on investment is assured? And those are difficult questions to answer, but we must answer them, or else we're not going to be able to turn the country into a construction site. Look, Clarence, we have no choice in this matter now. It is not an argument that we can afford to lose. It is not a debate that we can afford to lose. We must win, and we must win this battle decisively, because it starts at construction sites and then it moves to all other manners of and facets of society.
It has already,
so,
yeah.
Absolutely, and so that's why we are playing our role. That's why we are vocal around it. That's why even some people like MEC Martin Meyer are under severe death threats. But we cannot go and sit in a corner and hide away and hope that the problem will disappear. We have to meet it head on. We have to confront it head on. I know that the president is very supportive of the work that we are doing. The police minister is as well. And that's why that I think that if we come together under one roof, which we will do in the next while, and that the country knows exactly where we're headed and how we are going to move in this direction. I'm confident that we will make progress, and that we will not return to the levels of extortion and violence that we've seen previously.
Okay, and I think we need to understand exactly what we are being denied. When you say you're going to turn the country into a construction site, what does this Marshall Plan kind of look like? What are you going to be building?
Well, what we want to do is we want to ensure that we take the 900 billion rand that is earmarked for infrastructure development in the country over the next 3 years and ensure that we get value for money, that we make sure that there's water in our taps, that the roads that we drive on are suitable, that we have train tracks that people can get on and get to work, and that our ports and harbors are working efficiently. The infrastructure space is wide and enormous. And so we want to ensure that we have a rapid build in our infrastructure program. There are parts of the country where I come from, in KZN, and specifically eThekwini, the metro, where we haven't had water for 2 weeks because there is just the water infrastructure has not been built and maintained over the last 2 decades. So we are putting together a very focused plan through our fabulous entity, Infrastructure South Africa, that is going to become the key focal point for government-led infrastructure that will make sure that we deliver these projects, particularly to local government, on time and on budget. And I'm incredibly proud of the work that the City of Cape Town and the Mayor, Jordan Hill-Lewis, has done, in that they are effectively one of the biggest contributors to infrastructure-led development in the country. Just one municipality is doing that. So we've got to learn how they are doing it, why they are so good at what they do, and we've got to roll that out into every town and village across this country. But paired with that, we also need to make it much easier for the private sector to also enter the infrastructure space. And to that work, we are doing many changes with the National Treasury, particularly on the public-private partnership aspect, so that we are able to accept unsolicited bids, that if someone wants to build a desalination plant in the City of Cape Town and they believe that they can get an off-take for it, then they should do that, because it would also ease the pressure on government. So we will also be talking about some of those plans more tomorrow. On Thursday, we'll be going to China with the President on a state visit to seek more investment funding into our infrastructure build. So it's all hands on deck, and we are absolutely up to the task, Clarence, and we know that this is an immense responsibility that South Africa has given us, but I'm quite sure that in 5 years' time, we'll look back and all we'll see is cranes in the sky and shovels in the ground.
I'm again going to draw your attention to the Colombian example. Apparently, they appointed a minister of peace, and the minister of peace did a lot to turn the tide in Colombia when it came to construction mafias and extortion rackets. Apparently, I think there's a lot that we can learn there. But I'm worried about a national summit, because you, Minister Dean Macpherson, Public Works and Infrastructure Minister, you have called for a national summit. The law is absolutely clear on these things. What would the national summit, what would this talk shop entail?
Well, it wouldn't be a talk shop. It would be a defined a meeting of the non-provincial MECs that are politically responsible for infrastructure in their province, as I am politically responsible for the infrastructure program and build of government nationally, along with our colleagues in the justice and law enforcement ministries, to come together along, and I think we should also have our police commissioners from across the province, to say, how can we learn from best practice? Who's doing well? Who's not doing well? How can we learn from the City of Cape Town? How can we learn from these other examples like Colombia, or what the work that the police are now doing in KZN? And how do we have a single common approach? Because the reality is that I don't think that everyone is on the same page. And we then need to get everyone on the same page and then approach it with a single mindset to say that this is too important to let go. This is too important not to win. And what are those then public things that we agree to that the public can then hold us accountable to? that we can then measure the police against as well, and that we can then see progress on. That's what we want to see, is a meeting of minds, a publicly declared document that has deliverables and targets that we have to meet, and also gives the private sector the understanding and the security that we are up to the task, that they are also going to have their voices heard, because often we don't listen to them, and we must listen to them because they're at the coalface of this scourge. And I think that if we join hands in that fashion, that we're going to have a roadmap on how to deal with this for the future.
I've got a minute left. I need to find out about the dodgy leases. Are they nipped in the bud? Are they going to be exposés soon on that front?
You know, Clarence, I'm really frustrated that, you know, as the biggest, one of the biggest property owners in the country, that we lease so many buildings. I don't understand it when we can use so many of our own buildings. So we are going to be commencing an audit of government leases. We're going to be taking a random sample. I believe that all is not in order there, but we're doing it because we want to get things right. We're not here to sort of make headlines or go on witch hunts. We actually just want to get the department right and make it the centerpiece of economic growth in our country. And if we have the asset base to do so, we should be leveraging it, we should be using it, and we should be making sure that government officers reside in government buildings, particularly in inner cities like Durban and Johannesburg, that we ourselves are driving inner city regeneration. And hopefully we can have cities around the country that look as wonderful as Cape Town does, the CBD, in the middle of the night.
We're going to rest it there. We appreciate your time, and maybe we can touch base with you on your return from China. Minister of Public Works, Dean Macpherson, thank you very much. It's appreciated.